Now on BBC4, Tracey Emin gives a unique insight into the life of Louise Bourgeois and her deeply personal and, at times, sexually explicit art.
In order to liberate myself from the past, I have to reconstruct it, ponder about it, make a statue out of it, and get rid of it through making sculpture. I'm able to forget it afterwards. I have paid my debt to the past and am liberated.
It was like Louise was holding hands with me. When I think about the artists that Louise would have known, these great historical figures, Louise knew these people, knew these artists. I don't have much humility. I'm not going to pretend I do, but in that situation, I really did. I felt like I was holding the baton of time and history, and that Louise was like helping me through to the next stage of my life. Louise could have done anything. Louise could have been a doctor, a scientist, probably if she was a bit younger, an astronaut. But she chose to do art. She could master her materials so well, whether it was a tiny piece of work on fabric, a small delicate print, or these giant monumental sculptures. Some of her bronzes are like colossal. There was no doubt that a woman made that work, and I think that's very inspiring, and I think Louise is probably one of the greatest artists in the last, 2 centuries. When I look at Louise's work, or when I talk about Louise's work, I don't talk from a point of view of someone that's well-read or I'm learned on the subject of Louise Bourgeois. For me, I just have a natural response to the work, and it's what I feel like when I look at it. This is the first piece of work of Louise Bourgeois that I want to talk about. A lot of people would probably expect me to talk about the sewn works or the figurative works, but this one in this exhibition in Edinburgh is the one that really interests me. It's called poids, which actually in French means weights. The whole thing is cantilevered. Here you have all the weights, which are really, really, really heavy, and this is what retains the balance for the whole piece of work. And here we have this sort of like spiky, fragile, kind of chandelier shape going up to the glass balls. And of course, this is very much like a kind of female figure with the breast and almost like a kind of like womb-like shape with the kind of eggs hanging onto it. But the main thing is, within this work, you would think it's like the weights are actually protecting all of this fragility, and it's this balance thing of Louise Bourgeois' work that really interests me. Everything she did was about balance. What really, I think, is like, you know these little things that you have on buildings to stop birds from landing? That's what this reminds me of. It's almost like something which could be quite harmful, but yet protective of something. the eye at the top as well, looking out. No matter how simple it is, to me I see a whole strong figurative element that is about balance and about sustaining something. And I've heard that if you remove just one of these weights, the whole thing could just fall and crash, which would be horrific. But that's what Louise was like, that's what her work was about sustaining a kind of fragile moment, whether it was emotional, whether it was intellectual. And for me, in this whole exhibition, this is a piece of work I would very much like to have.
You have talked about the making of the work, but you have...
Louise, throughout the last 30 years of her life, she would have like these soirees, these tea parties. And my gallery in New York had promised me a treat. And I said, what I'd really like is to meet Louise Bourgeois.
This is an analogy. Yeah, I ask you an explanation and you give me an analogy.
I went into the back parlour where Louise was sitting. And the first thing that I thought about Louise was she had the most ginormous breast and her hands were on the table and she had these really strong hands. They were almost like an eagle's talons or something.
I grabbed her shoulder.
And she looked incredibly formidable and really strong. And of course I'd seen photos of her, but seeing her in real life was really almost like seeing an entity, not a human being.
I want my work to speak for itself.
And what is it you wanted to express? We have to know.
Tell Louise exactly what you wanted.
It's about the torment of being an artist.
The torment?
Yeah.
But it's absurd. It's not a torment to be an artist.
Yes, it is.
The premise is idiotic. It is not a torment to be an artist. It is a privilege.
These works, Triptych for the Red Room, I hadn't actually seen before until the other day. I might have seen them in a book, but I've never seen them for real. When I first looked at them, they kind of looked sexual, but I knew they weren't sexual. I knew it was more like a kind of, not a repulsion, but a kind of like joining of something. And as you walk down them, I actually don't really know which order they go in, but as I walk down them, this figure, they're kind of entwined and it kind of looks semi-sexual, but it's not. What we're actually seeing is some kind of hysterical fear on the female figure's form. And here, we have Louise's arch of hysteria. And this also looks like a very surrealist, kind of dreamlike, unreal situation too. These figures are kind of suspended away from each other and she's suspended in time and they're not together. And in this one, which is really interesting, this is definitely a boy. This is not a man, this is a boy. And then now you can really understand that it's the form of the mother. And so with this, it's kind of like quite tricky subject matter that she's dealing with. She's actually responding to how it feels to be a mother and maybe the repulsion of the child and wanting to distance herself from the child. But yet you've got this thing where she's completely joined as well and so close and bound up. It's Louise dealing with like a kind of emotional psychotic reaction to something and trying to deal with it within her work. Spider for me was something romantic. I could imagine people saying, meet me underneath the spider. Like you go on this fantastic date and then you get that idea of the spider like devouring you or getting caught up in its web. I mean, it is a mother and it's got the egg, it's got a marble egg in there. But this one's really like a mechanical spider, like something out of some Mad Max kind of film or something. It's quite scary. So this was like the really beautiful book that was made about the collaboration, Do Not Abandon Me. Many different images, but the main thing is the subject matter is male and female images. And even though these look kind of sexual, it's actually about this tiny female figure actually paying homage like to this giant male figure, almost like a god. I did the drawing over the top. Louise did the watercolours. I Lost You. This is about losing children, losing life. You know, whether or not it's abortion, miscarriages. You know, my grandmother told me this thing. She said, people in your life expect, you kind of expect maybe your husband to die or your parents to die, but you never expect to bury your children. And Louise had to bury her son. So I also think with Louise's subject of abandonment, there was also not just about her mother abandoning her, but also her son leaving her to another world. The interesting thing about the collaboration is that I could do whatever I liked. But I thought the images of Louise's were so beautiful and so perfect, I felt like I didn't need to do anything to them. And that's why it took me 2 years of deciding what to do. And the day that I did work on them, I did them all in one day, and every single one worked out perfect as far as I was concerned. But I had to be in this kind of Zen-like state. And this one's really interesting. Most people, when they see this one, they can't tell whether it's what is me or what is Louise. And usually people think Louise did the writing and I drew the figure, but actually it's the other way around. And that's really what I wanted as well. I didn't want it to be, I didn't want anyone to be able to tell what was mine and what was Louise's. I wanted the collaboration to look like one person, one work. But the simplicity of it just works brilliantly. And when you think about the age gap and the difference between Louise and myself, it really is incredible that it works so easily and so gently.
She turned me into a wild beast, right? I don't say that I am a wild beast all the time, but I'm a wild beast some of the time, right? The frustration, instead of turning into a running away, a muscular thing, the frustration was a kind of stiffening like this and keeping the resentment inside. And 25 years later, I have not come to terms with my resentment, which is there forever. Right. Right. That's it. Now, if you do not let me have the last word once in a while, then everything goes.
All these drawings are ready.
You worked with Louise for 30 years, from 1980 until she died, almost every day. You probably knew her better than anybody.
You know, for me, she still remained a mystery to the very end. I mean, I was fascinated from my first encounter with her, and just trying to figure out what makes this woman tick. From the very first, I was totally captured by her. I liked the way she looked. I liked the way she styled herself. I liked the way that when she invited me to the house, everything about her.
So this work's called Give and Take, and it's actually your hands, a cast of your hands, but it's also it's like the other work. It actually is it's like a seesaw, it's like a balance.
All her work has almost this duality of two things coexisting together. It sounds like a cliche, but this idea of two things coexisting, and it's sort of a balance, how these two things coexist, and it can tip one way or the other.
Do you think, for Louise, that it was important that it was your hands?
Pretty much everything in Louise is not general. It's not the body, it's her body, or it's the body of someone else. I mean, so she used me in a lot of pieces. 10 a.m., which is about our relationship. There is a specificity to the, at least the initial beginning of a work has to be addressed really to the way she feels, and usually the way she feels is really has to do with her interaction to somebody else. Louise is one of these people, when she was anxious, she would attack. At certain times I would just arrive at the house and I could just look at her and I know, uh-oh, this is, you know, a storm brewing and it's going to be a rough day.
But there's those fantastic clips of film I've seen of her smashing plaster casts, smashing things on
Dishes,
the floor.
everything.
Yeah, everything.
Just sort of screaming, jumping up and down, you know, on the floor, just like a tantrum, like a little kid, really quite juvenile in a way. I mean, the emotions were so intense and her fear was so intense. I don't think people realize she's so sensitive that everything was magnified way beyond proportion.
Which kind of makes sense with her work, because her work is so emotionally magnified as well. It's emotional, but yet highly intellectual, and it kind of gets into the nooks and the crannies of the mind. You know, this is a very simple piece of work to look at, but what it is actually, what it stands for and what it signifies is like highly complex. I think it's really beautiful, and I think Louise made this because she loved you very much. Louise was an insomniac. She would wake up and she would make these drawings in the middle of the night. She was always looking into other worlds, the twilight zone. Now, you were really good friends with her, not just a curator. You didn't just work with her on massive shows. You were good friends with her. How do you relate the Insomnia drawings to the real Louise, or do you think that was like another kind of Louise, like a ghostly Louise?
What was really interesting is that she was very confrontational. I mean, I was terrified of her. She was absolutely put me on the spot, made me feel about an inch high. And then when I discovered these drawings, they in a way revealed a different kind of bourgeois, the bourgeois that emerged at night when people had gone. And they seemed to me to kind of exist in, I think I once called it the slipstream between past and present, between reality and imagination. She has a memory of the orange trees in the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, and somewhere talks to worrying about whether they'd survive the cold winter, because of course they have oranges on them, and you know, so I think this is what that's a reference to that again. So it's memories, really old, you know, memories of a long time ago coming back to haunt her at that period.
What is really, really so overwhelming is the genuine innocence of them. They weren't done to be seen. You can really see that when you look at them all. Yeah. And it really is like going into her mind. Yeah.
I first got to know Bourgeois' work as an artist from the 1950s. Then to rediscover her as a contemporary artist in the 80s and 90s, still making incredibly young work, was extraordinary.
I think, my thing, when I came across Louise's work, I thought she was the same age as me.
Exactly.
But, oh, here's this young American artist who makes work that I really relate to. Because when I first started, nobody was making work about emotion or about these kind of so-called embarrassing subjects that you shouldn't be talking about. And if you're a woman and you kept making constant references, people say, oh, God, get over it, will you? But of course, in life, how you get over things is to readdress them, reevaluate them, and that's constantly what Louise did. It was her own psychoanalysis through her work.
I've failed as a wife, as a woman, as a mother, as a hostess, as an artist, as a businesswoman, as a friend, as a daughter, as a sister. I have not failed as a truth seeker. And I love that, you know, and it's so It's so bourgeois. She kind of failed at everything, but at the really important thing, which is about integrity, sincerity, truth.
Well, I mean, this is being blatantly honest with yourself. It's cruel almost to think that you failed at so many things.
I think bourgeois slipped in and out of depression. And there's an addendum to this. It says lowest ebb.
Oh, no.
She was writing from bleak, black despair. She lived with an exclusively male household. She was struggling as an artist. It was a very male environment in New York in the 1950s. She hadn't been in America that long. She was a French woman. English was her second language. She was struggling on all fronts.
I'm afraid of silence. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid to fall down. I'm afraid of insomnia. I'm afraid of emptiness. Is something missing? Yes, something is missing and always will be missing. The experience of emptiness. To miss. What are you missing? Nothing. I am imperfect, but I am lacking nothing. Maybe something is missing, but I do not know, and therefore I do not suffer. Empty stomach, empty house, empty bottle. The falling into a vacuum signals the abandonment of the mother. Louise, when she was 21, her mother died, and a lot of her work was based about her mother and father's relationship. Even right to the end of her life, she was still always continuously reworking these subjects in a very cathartic way. And I find this a very honest statement about how you feel when you feel totally isolated and totally alone. And what's really amazing and lovely in this is Louise is having a conversation with herself. That's how alone she felt at that time when she wrote this. And it's so pure and so simple. It almost looks like an epitaph. It looks like a eulogy epitaph, something that you could almost have on a gravestone. It's that pure and that simple and that beautiful. There's two people here. There's a very strong person that can deal with the emptiness, and then there's this other person that's questioning it. And with that, Louise makes a balance with the work again, and that's why I respond to it so much. So there's nothing schizophrenic about it. What it is someone being really, really brutally honest with themselves in a way that most people wouldn't want to be.
I indicate my space, and I put inside my fears. What is in this space is under my control.
This work's called Janus Fleuri, but I'm not very good on titles. I've always called this work that thing, that kind of, it's kind of like an organ, like something sexual, something physical, but I could never work out whether it was male or female. And for me, it was like a kind of womb-like shape that had kind of exploded. It was also very phallic, like penises. It was also breast-like. There was all these things that I saw in it. And the title comes from a Roman god, and a god with two faces. This again is about the two things going on, the duality, and it's a duality of male and female, and you see so many things in this, but for me it's about fecundity on a really big level. It's about this kind of sexual energy of this organ. It's very tactile. You want to kind of touch it and you want to sort of find out more about it, and you think, the most interesting thing about this work is you think you've seen something like this before. You think you might know what it is, but you don't. You really don't know. This is an organ invented by Louise's imagination and by Louise's hands. this is a large series of works, and they're actually prints, etchings, and then Louise has painted over the top. And what's really amazing about this is the size and the energy involved. And Louise was right at the end of her life when she created these. And the words are really, really incredibly profound and beautiful. I am packing my bags, I leave the nest. Something atrocious must have happened that I don't understand. How many times in our lives has really terrible things happened that we didn't understand? How many times in our life we felt something's happening behind the scenes and we just feel awful? This is what, this is what she's dealing with. And also all the shapes. There's nothing aggressive here. Everything is, it's almost like looking into, maybe into her mind, into her blood, into her body, into her soul. There's only one purely figurative picture here of one figure, but all the rest are like a breakdown of what we are. When terror pounces, grips me, I create an image. So it's almost like she responds to the fear, she's ready for the fear, and then she captures it, she makes something of it. Struck by utter revulsion, I do nothing, paralysed, immobilised by the horror. Yet again, it's about being struck by fear and not being able to do anything, yet Louise is analysing that fear by actually making work about it. This is a really strange image. The whole image is very peculiar. You have like these intestines, these innards, and it's kind of like the body, but also you've got this strange face with 4 eyes that actually does look quite afraid. And just walking around this room, you can actually feel the emotion, but it's very beautiful at the same time. It's about fear and beauty. I leave my home. All of these things are about someone who's preparing themselves for a journey, and not an angry journey, a journey that she's come to terms with. Where do you go? Where would anyone go? Where would someone go at the age of 97? I think there's only probably one place to go. Louise did say to me, do you have plenty of time? But I think it's about how I use it and how dedicated I am towards that time and how seriously I take it. We've only got one life, we've only got one thing. I'm lucky enough to have found my vocation, that it's art, and I really shouldn't abuse that in any way whatsoever. It's like the world of Louise has kind of opened up to me as well, and for me to facilitate and use, which is incredibly generous, but I think that's what Louise's intention was. Work was her main thing, her main focus, her main drive in life, and that's why she was so successful at the end of her life, because that was her ambition, that was her vocation. So I'm hoping that a bit of that is rubbing off onto me.
More Secret Knowledge tomorrow here on BBC4 with Castiglione, the rogue genius of Baroque, at 8:30.